When Elena Cortez gave a glass of pristine well water to a parched hiker who collapsed at the edge of her crumbling Montana ranch, she never imagined that beneath her drought-ravaged property flowed an extraordinary geothermal spring containing minerals so rare that the U.S. military would offer her $53 million for development rights, transforming her from a grief-stricken widow facing bankruptcy into the steward of America's most valuable therapeutic water resource. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The gentle morning breeze carried the scent of dried grass and dust across Elena's front porch as she sat in her late husband's rocking chair, staring out at the barren landscape that had once been the thriving Cortez family ranch. In her hands, she clutched a stack of past due notices, the paper worn thin from countless readings. The most important, a final foreclosure warning from Western Mountain Bank, gave her exactly 28 days before they would reclaim the property that had been her home for 23 years. At 53, Elena Cortez found herself in a position she'd never imagined. Alone, financially ruined, and about to lose everything she and Michael had built together. 3 years had passed since the accident that took her husband's life, leaving her to manage their 280-acre ranch alone with mounting debts and a failing business. The drought that had plagued western Montana for 4 consecutive seasons had transformed their once profitable horse ranch and hay operation into a desolate wasteland of parched earth and withered vegetation. The irony wasn't lost on Elena that the very land that had sustained 4 generations of her husband's family was now killing itself, drying up and blowing away just like her hopes for the future. The Cortez Ranch had been renowned throughout Madison County for its exceptional quarter horses, riding programs, and premium hay production. Established in 1937 by Michael's grandfather, Joaquin Cortez, a Spanish immigrant with extraordinary horsemanship skills, the ranch had flourished for decades as each generation added their expertise and passion to the family legacy. When Elena and Michael took over operations from his parents in 2001, they had expanded into therapeutic riding programs for children with disabilities, veterans with PTSD, and at-risk youth. The Healing Hooves program had become their signature offering, combining Elena's background in occupational therapy with Michael's gifted touch with horses. They had built specialized facilities, trained staff, and created a sanctuary that served hundreds of clients annually while maintaining their traditional ranching operations. But everything changed 3 years ago when Michael's truck had skidded off the mountain road during a late spring snowstorm as he returned from delivering a prized yearling to a buyer in Wyoming. The call from the highway patrol at 2:14 a.m. had shattered Elena's world, leaving her alone to manage an operation that had always been their shared dream. The first year after Michael's death, Elena had managed to keep things running through sheer determination and the help of their longtime ranch hands, Pedro and Luisa Alvarez. But when the drought began in earnest the following spring, everything started unraveling at an alarming pace. The hayfields produced less than 40% of their normal yield. The natural springs that had provided water for livestock began to dry up, forcing Elena to purchase water and haul it to distant pastures at considerable expense. The therapeutic riding programs suffered as the lush green paddocks turned brown and dusty, creating conditions that were less than ideal for vulnerable clients. By the second year of drought, Elena had been forced to sell half their herd of 35 quarter horses, including several champions that Michael had bred and trained himself. Each sale felt like another betrayal of his memory, another piece of their shared legacy disappearing trailer by trailer down their long gravel driveway. The Healing Hooves program had been reduced to operating just 2 days per week with a skeleton staff after Elena had to let go of 3 full-time instructors and their facility manager. Now, in the 3rd year of unrelenting drought, Elena was facing the final collapse of everything they had built. The financial figures that kept her awake at night were merciless. The ranch that had generated annual revenue of $325,000 during its peak years was now bringing in less than $90,000, while still carrying operational costs of approximately $180,000 per year. The life insurance policy that should have provided a financial safety net had been woefully inadequate, most of it consumed by medical bills from Michael's 3 days in intensive care before he succumbed to his injuries. The mortgage on the ranch property stood at $412,000, with monthly payments of $3,150 that Elena had missed for the past 3 months. Property taxes of $12,800 were now 6 months overdue, with penalties accruing daily. The equipment loans for their tractor, hay baler, and specialized therapeutic riding facility equipment totaled another $137,000, with monthly payments that hadn't been made since early spring. Elena's personal financial situation was equally dire. Her checking account showed a balance of $847.32. Her retirement account, which had once contained nearly $120,000, had been completely depleted to keep the ranch operational during the first year after Michael's death. Her credit cards were maxed out at $24,600 combined, representing emergency purchases of feed, veterinary care, and crucial repairs to equipment and facilities. The physical toll of financial stress and unrelenting work was evident in Elena's appearance. Her once lustrous dark hair now showed prominent streaks of grey that she no longer bothered to colour. Deep lines etched the corners of her eyes and mouth, and her hands showed the calluses and small scars of someone performing physical labour far beyond what she'd been accustomed to before Michael's death. She had lost 22 pounds in the past year alone, her clothes hanging loosely on her frame as meals became an afterthought in the constant struggle to keep the ranch functioning. Even the ranch itself bore visible signs of decline and deferred maintenance. The once immaculate white fences needed painting and repairs, with several sections leaning precariously or missing rails entirely. The main barn's roof leaked in 3 places, with plastic tarps serving as temporary patches that had become semi-permanent fixtures. The riding arena that had been the centerpiece of their therapeutic programs had developed dangerous footing as the drought-hardened soil created uneven surfaces that posed risks to both horses and riders. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The ranch house itself, a beautiful craftsman-style home built by Michael's grandfather and expanded by each subsequent generation, was showing signs of neglect that would have been unthinkable during Michael's lifetime. The wraparound porch needed structural repairs, where support posts had rotted at the base. The kitchen appliances were failing one by one, with Elena now cooking on just 2 functioning burners of their once professional gas range. The central heating system had stopped working the previous winter, forcing Elena to rely on the wood stove and space heaters while wearing layers of clothing indoors. Most painful of all was the abandoned construction at the east end of the property, Michael's final project. They had begun building an indoor riding facility that would allow their therapeutic programs to operate year-round, regardless of Montana's often harsh weather. The foundation had been poured and the steel framework erected in the weeks before Michael's accident. Now it stood as a skeletal monument to interrupted dreams, exposed metal rusting in the elements, a visual reminder of all that might have been. Elena had exhausted every possible source of financial assistance. She had applied for agricultural disaster relief through federal and state programs, only to discover that most aid was directed toward food production rather than horse operations or therapeutic services. She had approached 3 different banks about refinancing the property, but her deteriorating financial situation and the drought-impacted value of the ranch made her an unacceptable risk. She had even investigated selling conservation easements on portions of the property, but the prolonged drought had reduced the ecological value of the land to the point that conservation organizations showed little interest. The Therapeutic Riding Association, that had once celebrated healing hooves as a model program, had offered a small emergency grant of $7,500. But it was a drop in the bucket compared to Elena's mounting debts. Several former clients had organized a GoFundMe campaign that raised just over $15,000, enough to cover the most urgent veterinary bills for the remaining horses, but not enough to make a dent in the larger financial crisis. Elena's relationships had suffered alongside the ranch. Her daughter Sophia, now in her second year of veterinary school in Colorado, called less frequently as conversations inevitably turned to the ranch's problems and Elena's growing desperation. Her son Marco, serving in the Navy and stationed in San Diego, had offered to send part of his military salary home, but Elena had refused, not wanting her children to sacrifice their futures for what increasingly seemed like a lost cause. Her friendship circle had contracted as the demands of the ranch consumed more of her time and energy. The weekly coffee gatherings with other ranching women that had once provided crucial social support had fallen by the wayside as Elena could no longer justify taking even 2 hours away from work. Her involvement in the County Agricultural Association, the Therapeutic Riding Network, and the local church had all diminished to the point of non-existence as survival became her only focus. The isolation of rural Montana, once a source of peace and connection to the land, now felt like abandonment. The nearest neighbor was 4 miles away, and the small town of Pinecrest, where Elena had once enjoyed monthly dinner outings with Michael, now seemed as distant as another country despite being only 18 miles down the valley. Elena couldn't remember the last time she had eaten at a restaurant, seen a movie, or purchased clothing that wasn't absolutely necessary for ranch work. Elena's daily routine had become a grueling exercise in triage, determining which crisis needed immediate attention and which problems could be temporarily deferred. She woke at 4:30 each morning to feed the remaining 15 horses, check water troughs, and perform basic veterinary care for any animals showing signs of distress. By 7 a.m., she would shift to maintenance tasks, mending fences, repairing equipment, or addressing whatever structural issues threatened immediate operations. On days when the Healing Hooves program was running, now reduced to Tuesdays and Thursdays, Elena would prepare the facilities, groom and tack the therapy horses, and assist the one remaining part-time instructor with the clients. The program now served just 8 veterans with PTSD and 12 children with various disabilities, less than a third of their previous capacity, but still requiring intense effort to maintain even minimal standards of care and effectiveness. After the client sessions ended at 4 p.m., Elena would return to ranch maintenance until dark, then spend several hours at the kitchen table attempting to manage finances, respond to creditors, search for grant opportunities, or investigate other potential sources of income. She typically fell into bed after midnight, physically exhausted but often unable to sleep, as anxiety about the ranch's future kept her mind racing until the early morning hours when the cycle would begin again. The drought that had precipitated the ranch's financial collapse showed no signs of abating. The mountain snowpack that fed the region's watersheds had been below 60% of normal for the past 3 years, and local meteorologists were predicting another dry winter. The county had implemented water restrictions that limited agricultural users to 70% of their normal allocations, forcing Elena to make difficult decisions about which pastures to sacrifice and which to maintain with precious water resources. The remaining natural water sources on the property had dwindled to just two, a small creek that now ran dry by mid-July each year, and the old ranch well that Michael's grandfather had dug by hand in 1937. The well, located behind the main house, and housed in a small stone structure built by Michael's father in the 1970s, had been the ranch's salvation during previous dry spells. It tapped into a deep underground source that had never failed, even during the historic drought of 1988, when ranchers throughout the region had been forced to sell entire herds due to water shortages. Elena had come to regard the well as the ranch's heart, the one thing that continued functioning properly despite the cascade of failures around it. The water it provided was exceptionally pure, with a slightly sweet taste that visitors often commented on. Michael had been oddly protective of the well, refusing to connect it to modern pumping systems and insisting on maintaining the original hand pump alongside the electric pump they'd installed in the 1990s. "Never know when you might need to get water the old way," he'd always said, a bit of practical wisdom that had seemed quaint before the ranch's financial troubles made electricity bills another source of monthly anxiety. As Elena sat on the porch that August morning, contemplating the foreclosure notice and trying to formulate a plan that seemed increasingly impossible, she had no way of knowing that the well Michael had so carefully preserved was about to change. Everything. She couldn't have imagined that the water flowing beneath her failing ranch would soon prove more valuable than all the horses, facilities, and land combined. And she certainly couldn't have anticipated that a chance encounter with a stranger in distress would reveal the extraordinary resource that had been literally beneath her feet for decades. Elena Cortez was about to discover that sometimes hope arrives in the most unexpected forms, and that the very thing that seems most ordinary, a simple glass of water offered to someone in need, can be the catalyst that transforms everything. But first, a visitor would need to find her way to the isolated ranch, drawn by circumstances that would initially seem like terrible luck, but would ultimately prove to be the intersection of preparation and opportunity that creates what others might call a miracle. The late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Elena finished mending a section of fence in the east pasture. August in Montana typically brought cooler temperatures as summer began its transition toward fall. But this drought year had delivered punishing heat well above normal for the region. The thermometer on the barn had registered 97 degrees earlier, and the dry air pulled moisture from everything it touched, leaving Elena's skin parched despite the water bottle she'd been sipping from all afternoon. As she loaded tools into the battered ranch pickup, another reminder of Michael, who had meticulously maintained their vehicles before his death, Elena caught sight of something unusual in the distance. A figure was making its way slowly up the long gravel driveway that connected the ranch to the county road, moving with the uneven gait of someone in distress. Through the heat shimmer rising from the baked earth, Elena couldn't immediately determine whether it was a man or woman, but the stumbling progress suggested someone in serious trouble. Elena dropped her tools and jogged toward the figure, instinctively concerned. As she drew closer, she could see it was a woman, perhaps in her mid-40s, dressed in khaki hiking pants and a light blue moisture-wicking shirt that was dark with sweat. A large backpack weighed down her shoulders, and sophisticated-looking equipment hung from various attachment points. The woman's face was alarmingly flushed, her breathing labored, and she stumbled slightly with each step. "Hello there! Are you all right?" Elena called out, increasing her pace. The woman looked up, relief washing over her heat-strained features. She attempted to respond, but managed only a hoarse whisper that Elena couldn't make out. As Elena reached her, she could see the classic signs of heat exhaustion, the red face, excessive sweating now giving way to dry, hot skin, and the slightly disoriented look in the woman's eyes. "Let's get you out of this heat," Elena said, gently taking the woman's backpack to lighten her load. My house is just up ahead. We need to cool you down and get some water into you. The woman nodded gratefully, leaning slightly on Elena's arm as they made their way toward the ranch house. Thank you, she managed to whisper. My GPS malfunctioned. Been walking hours. I'm Elena Cortez, Elena said as they walked. This is my ranch. We're pretty isolated out here, not the best place to get lost, especially in this heat. Dr. Amara Wilson, the woman replied, her voice strengthening slightly as they approached the shade of the house. Geologist, research team, separated. Elena helped Dr. Wilson up the porch steps and into the relative coolness of the house. The lack of functioning air conditioning meant the interior was still warm, but the thick walls of the old ranch house provided some protection from the direct heat. Elena settled her visitor into the most comfortable chair in the living room, directly in front of a large box fan that circulated the air. Let me get you some water, Elena said, hurrying to the kitchen. She filled a large glass from the tap that was connected to the old well and brought it back along with a damp cloth for Dr. Wilson's forehead. Small sips, Elena instructed, handing over the glass. If you drink too much too quickly when you're this dehydrated, it can make you sick. Dr. Wilson nodded her understanding and took a careful sip of the water. Her eyes widened immediately, and she looked at the glass with an expression of surprise. This water, she said, her voice stronger than it had been since Elena found her, it's extraordinary. The mineral profile is... She took another small sip, closing her eyes momentarily. Where does this come from? Elena was taken aback by the reaction. It's just our well water. Been the ranch's main water source since my husband's grandfather dug the well back in 1937. Everyone says it tastes good, but it's nothing special. Just water. Dr. Wilson shook her head slowly, studying the glass with newfound interest. No, Ms. Cortez, this isn't just water. I've been studying water sources throughout the western states for 20 years, and I've never tasted anything quite like this. She took another careful sip. The mineral composition is remarkable. There's something very unusual about this water source. As Dr. Wilson continued to hydrate, her professional demeanor began to return, the crisis of heat exhaustion gradually receding. She explained that she was leading a geological survey team studying underground water systems throughout Montana and Wyoming, with particular attention to thermal and mineral-rich sources that might have scientific or commercial applications. We've been mapping anomalies in the Madison River watershed, she explained, following geological indicators that suggest unique hydrological features. Our satellite data and preliminary ground surveys indicated something unusual in this general area, but we hadn't pinpointed an exact location. Elena listened with growing curiosity. And you think our old ranch well might be connected to whatever you're looking for? Dr. Wilson nodded emphatically. Based on the taste alone, I suspect your well is tapping into something quite extraordinary. The mineral profile is similar to certain therapeutic springs in Europe that have been used for centuries for medicinal purposes, but with unique characteristics I haven't encountered before. As Dr. Wilson's condition improved, she became increasingly animated about the potential significance of Elena's water source. Miss Cortez, would it be possible for me to see your well? I'd like to take some preliminary measurements and samples, if you wouldn't mind. Elena agreed, curious about what had generated such enthusiasm in the scientist. They walked together to the small stone structure behind the house that protected the well. Dr. Wilson immediately began examining the construction, asking detailed questions about the well's history, depth, flow rate, and performance during drought conditions. Your husband's grandfather chose this location with remarkable intuition, Dr. Wilson observed as she studied the surrounding landscape. Without modern geological surveys or equipment, he somehow identified what might be the optimal access point to an extraordinary underground water system. From her backpack, Dr. Wilson produced several compact scientific instruments that she used to test the water's temperature, pH level, mineral content, and other characteristics that Elena didn't fully understand. With each measurement, the geologist's excitement visibly grew. "This is remarkable," she said, recording data in a waterproof notebook. "The water temperature is a consistent 72 degrees, significantly warmer than typical groundwater in this region, which suggests geothermal influence. The mineral content is extraordinarily high in certain beneficial compounds, while remaining perfectly balanced for human consumption. And the flow rate you've described indicates a substantial underground source rather than a limited pocket." Dr. Wilson looked up from her instruments with an expression of professional excitement that bordered on awe. "Ms. Cortez, I believe your well is accessing what we call a primary vent of a previously undocumented geothermal spring system. Based on these preliminary readings and the geological surveys that brought our team to this region, this could be one of the most significant therapeutic water discoveries in North America." Elena stared at Dr. Wilson, struggling to understand the implications. "What exactly does that mean?" Dr. Wilson carefully put away her testing equipment before answering. "It means that your property is sitting above what could be millions of gallons of extraordinarily valuable therapeutic mineral water. Water with natural properties that could have significant applications in medicine, health products, and specialized agricultural uses. Water that research institutions, health companies, and government agencies would pay substantial amounts to access and study." The scientist paused, seeming to consider how to explain the full significance of her discovery. "Ms. Cortez, if my preliminary assessment is correct, your ranch isn't just a piece of agricultural land. It's potentially the access point to a natural resource that could be worth tens of millions of dollars to the right developers or research partners." Elena felt suddenly lightheaded, unable to fully process what Dr. Wilson was telling her. "Are you saying our well water, the same water we've been using for laundry and washing dishes for decades, might be valuable?" "I'm saying," Dr. Wilson replied carefully, "that you should consider having your water rights formally evaluated by specialists in natural resource law. Because what you have here could potentially change not just your financial situation, but contribute to medical, research and therapeutic applications that could benefit thousands of people." As Elena stood beside the stone well house that had been part of the ranch landscape for her entire married life, she felt a strange disconnection from reality. For 3 years, she had been fighting a losing battle against drought, debt, and despair, watching everything she and Michael had built slowly crumble around her. And now this scientist was suggesting that the solution to her problems might have been literally beneath her feet all along, flowing silently through the well that Michael had so carefully maintained. Dr. Wilson spent the remainder of the afternoon conducting additional tests and measurements, photographing the well structure and surrounding landscape, and filling out detailed scientific forms that she explained would be submitted to her research institute for further analysis. She also provided Elena with contact information for several attorneys and consultants who specialized in water rights law, natural resource development, and negotiations with research institutions and government agencies. "Ms. Cortez," Dr. Wilson said as she prepared to contact her research team, who had been searching for her since she'd become separated from the group, "I want you to understand that what I've found here today is going to attract significant attention once my report is filed. Research institutions, medical companies, wellness industry developers, and government agencies will all be very interested in your water source." She handed Elena her business card along with a folder containing preliminary test results and contact information for the specialist she'd recommended. "I'll be submitting my findings within the next week, and I expect you'll be contacted by various interested parties shortly after that. In the meantime, I strongly suggest you contact one of these attorneys to begin protecting your interests." As Dr. Wilson's colleagues arrived to collect her, Elena stood beside her family's well, holding a folder full of scientific reports and legal contacts, trying to process how completely her situation had changed in just a few hours. The simple act of helping a stranger in distress had revealed that her failing ranch might be sitting atop a natural resource of extraordinary value, one that could potentially save her from financial ruin while opening up entirely new possibilities for the future. That evening, as Elena sat at her kitchen table surrounded by Dr. Wilson's scientific reports and contact information, she felt overwhelming, conflicting emotions. Hope warred with skepticism, excitement with caution. The rational part of her mind insisted that this was too convenient, too miraculous to be real, that a century-old ranch well couldn't possibly contain the kind of natural resource that would solve all her financial problems. The practical voice in her head, the one that had been managing crisis after crisis for 3 years, warned that this could be another disappointment, another false hope in a long series of setbacks. Yet Dr. Wilson had been so convinced, so professionally excited by her findings. The geologist hadn't seemed like someone promoting a get-rich-quick scheme or trying to take advantage of a desperate rancher. She'd behaved like a scientist who had made a significant discovery and wanted to ensure that Elena understood its potential importance. The practical obstacles to pursuing Dr. Wilson's suggestions were immediate and daunting. Elena couldn't afford to hire specialized attorneys or consultants. The preliminary consultation fees alone would probably exceed her entire remaining bank balance. She had no experience with research institutions, government agencies, or corporate negotiations. She didn't understand the legal complexities of natural resource development or the regulatory frameworks that might govern access to underground water sources. Most importantly, Elena was facing a foreclosure deadline in less than a month. Even if her property was sitting above the most valuable water resource in Montana, she couldn't access that value quickly enough to save the ranch from the bank's seizure. The legal and regulatory processes involved would surely take months or years, not the mere weeks she had left. Sleep eluded Elena that night as her mind raced through possibilities, calculations, and fears. By morning, however, she had made a decision that surprised her with its boldness. Instead of dismissing Dr. Wilson's discovery as an interesting but impractical revelation, Elena would spend the day investigating water rights law, geothermal, springs, and the institutions that might be interested in such resources. Her first stop was the Madison County Public Library in the town of Pinecrest, where she hadn't set foot since before Michael's death. The librarian, Mrs. Henderson, welcomed her warmly and helped her access research databases and legal resources that might provide information about water rights and natural resource development. What Elena discovered during her research both excited and intimidated her. Dr. Wilson had been entirely accurate in her assessment of the potential value of therapeutic mineral springs. Research institutions, medical companies, and wellness industry developers were indeed paying substantial amounts for access to unique water sources with proven therapeutic properties. You'll be negotiating with corporate entities that specialize in resource development and have teams of scientists, lawyers, and financial experts working full-time on these deals. You'll be subject to state and federal regulations that can change based on political developments beyond your control. Blackwood turned back to face Elena with an expression that conveyed both opportunity and caution. The potential rewards are significant, but so are the potential complications. If something goes wrong, if scientific verification reveals problems, if regulatory approvals are delayed, if market conditions change, you could find yourself with legal obligations and financial commitments that compound your current challenges rather than resolving them. Elena appreciated the attorney's forthrightness. Too many people in recent years had offered her simplified solutions or false hopes. Blackwood was treating her like an intelligent partner who deserved to understand both the opportunities and risks of the path ahead. After several moments of thoughtful silence, Elena asked, "What do you recommend?" Blackwood returned to her seat and leaned forward with the focused energy of someone who had found a professionally challenging case that also offered the opportunity to help someone in genuine need. "I recommend that we pursue a hybrid approach, initiating contact with the Department of Defense Research Division while simultaneously arranging bridge financing that can address your immediate foreclosure crisis. This approach addresses your most urgent need while positioning your water resource for optimal long-term value." The attorney pulled out a timeline that illustrated how various processes would unfold over the next several weeks and months. "We'll begin by filing formal notices with relevant regulatory agencies, establishing your legal claims to the water resource, and arranging expedited scientific verification by independent laboratories. Simultaneously, we'll approach specialized lenders about bridge financing secured by the verified water rights." As Elena reviewed the proposed timeline, she felt a complex mix of hope, anxiety, and something approaching disbelief that her life could potentially transform so dramatically in just a few weeks. The practical rancher in her, the woman who had been fighting a losing battle against drought and debt for 3 years, remained skeptical that anything could change quickly enough to save her property. But the part of her that had always shared Michael's entrepreneurial spirit recognized a genuine opportunity that deserved serious consideration. "I need to think about this overnight," Elena said finally. "This affects not just me but my children's inheritance and the legacy of my husband's family. I can't make this decision without careful consideration." Blackwood nodded approvingly. "That's exactly what I would recommend. Take the documents home, sleep on it, and call me tomorrow with your decision. But remember that timing is critical given your foreclosure deadline. The sooner we begin the legal and verification processes, the better our chances of securing bridge financing before the bank's deadline." As Elena drove back to the ranch that afternoon, the Montana landscape seemed different somehow. The familiar mountains and valleys holding new possibility, where before they had only represented the boundaries of her increasingly desperate situation. The folder of legal documents on the passenger seat beside her represented either a lifeline to a new future or a complicated detour that might ultimately lead to the same painful destination. That evening, as Elena sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of orange and purple, she found herself speaking aloud to Michael, as she often did when facing difficult decisions. "What would you do, my love?" she asked the empty chair beside her. "Is this a real opportunity or just another false hope? Am I grasping at straws because I'm desperate, or would you see the same potential that Dr. Wilson and Ms. Blackwood seem to see?" The breeze carried no answer, but Elena felt a familiar sense of Michael's practical optimism, his tendency to see opportunities where others saw only obstacles, his belief that problems existed to be solved rather than suffered through. He had always been the one to push forward when challenges arose, finding creative solutions and refusing to accept defeat even when the odds seemed insurmountable. As darkness fell over the ranch, Elena made her decision. She would sign Blackwood's contingency agreement and pursue the water rights development process. The risks were significant, but no greater than the certainty of losing everything if she did nothing. And if Dr. Wilson was correct about the value of the water resource, this path offered not just financial salvation, but the possibility of preserving and expanding Michael's legacy in ways that honored his vision for the ranch. As a place of healing and renewal, Elena called Julia Blackwood first thing the next morning to inform her of the decision. The attorney's response was immediate and energetic, reflecting professional excitement about a case that offered both interesting legal challenges and the opportunity to help a client in genuine need. "Excellent decision, Ms. Cortez," Blackwood said. "I've already begun preliminary work on your case, and I have encouraging news to share. Dr. Wilson's initial report has been reviewed by colleagues at her research institute, and their assessment confirms her evaluation of your water resource's potential significance. Additionally, I've received an inquiry from a Department of Defense research coordinator who learned about Dr. Wilson's discovery through scientific channels." The attorney explained that the Pentagon's Therapeutic Resources Division had been funding research into natural compounds that showed promise for treating traumatic brain injuries and PTSD in military personnel. The division had expressed preliminary interest in Elena's water source based on Dr. Wilson's initial findings regarding certain rare mineral compounds present in the geothermal spring. "This is potentially excellent news," Blackwood continued. "Federal research partnerships, particularly with the DoD, can move more quickly than private sector deals when there's potential benefit for military personnel. And the connection to your existing therapeutic riding program for veterans creates a compelling narrative that might accelerate interest and approval processes." Over the next 3 weeks, Elena's daily reality transformed dramatically. Instead of the grinding routine of maintaining a failing ranch while watching the foreclosure deadline approach, she found herself at the center of a whirlwind of scientific, legal, and business activities that left little time for the despair that had been her constant companion for 3 years. A team of hydrogeologists and mineral specialists descended on the ranch, bringing sophisticated equipment that mapped the underground spring system, analyzed water samples, and documented flow rates and mineral compositions. Their findings confirmed Dr. Wilson's initial assessment. The Cortez Ranch sat atop what appeared to be a previously undocumented geothermal spring system with extraordinarily rare mineral properties. The water contained a unique combination of trace elements that preliminary research suggested might have significant therapeutic applications, particularly for neurological conditions and inflammatory disorders. The scientific verification process revealed that the well Michael's grandfather had dug in 1937 had somehow identified the optimal access point to the underground spring system, a fact that the lead scientist described as either remarkable, intuition, or extraordinary luck. The spring origin appeared to be deep beneath the eastern portion of the property, with the well positioned at exactly the point where the mineral-rich water reached its closest approach to the surface, while remaining naturally filtered through specific rock formations that enhanced its purity. Legal processes moved forward simultaneously, with Julia Blackwood's firm establishing formal documentation of Elena's water rights, filing notices with state regulatory agencies, and initiating discussions with potential development partners. The contingency arrangement meant that Elena didn't have to worry about legal costs, while Blackwood's expertise ensured that every filing and negotiation positioned the water resource for maximum value and protection. Most significantly, representatives from the Department of Defense Therapeutic Resources Division visited the ranch to personally evaluate the water source and discuss potential research partnerships. Dr. Lawrence Chen, the division's lead researcher, explained that the DoD had been investigating natural compounds that showed promise for treating the signature injuries of recent military conflicts, traumatic brain injuries, and PTSD. Certain mineral compounds found in your spring system, Dr. Chen explained during his visit, have molecular structures similar to experimental treatments that have shown promising results in our preliminary studies. But the synthetic versions we've been working with have limitations and side effects that might be absent in naturally occurring compounds. Your water source could potentially provide a breakthrough in our research efforts. The DoD's interest led to expedited processing of water samples through military research laboratories, with results that generated excitement throughout the research division. Preliminary tests indicated that the spring water contained compounds that interacted with neurological systems in ways that might reduce inflammation, promote cellular repair, and regulate neurotransmitter activity, all critical factors in treating brain injuries and stress disorders. With scientific verification progressing rapidly and federal interest growing, Julia Blackwood was able to approach specialized lenders about bridge financing. The combination of verified scientific value and potential DoD partnership has created exceptional interest, Blackwood explained during a conference call with Elena. We've received preliminary financing offers from 3 different institutions, all willing to provide funds secured by the verified water rights. The most promising offer came from Western Resource Capital, a financial institution that specialized in natural resource development. They proposed a $2.5 million bridge loan secured by the verified water rights, with a 2-year term and interest-only payments until longer-term development agreements generated revenue streams. The loan amount would be more than sufficient to resolve the bank foreclosure, pay off existing equipment loans, and provide operating capital while more comprehensive development agreements were negotiated. 25 days after Dr. Wilson had stumbled onto her property, just 3 days before the scheduled foreclosure, Elena signed the bridge financing agreement in Julia Blackwood's Bozeman office. The following day, $2.5 million was deposited into a new account established for the Cortez Ranch Water Development Project. Elena's first action was to contact Western Mountain Bank and inform them that she was prepared to pay off the entire mortgage balance immediately. The bank representative, who had been coldly bureaucratic during previous discussions about the foreclosure, became suddenly accommodating and even offered to waive certain fees if Elena would consider maintaining her banking relationship with the institution. Elena declined politely, having already arranged to transfer her accounts to a local bank that had been supportive of other ranchers during difficult times. As Elena drove home from paying off the ranch mortgage, a transaction that had taken less than 20 minutes to erase the threat that had hung over her for months, she felt a complex mixture of relief, disbelief, and a strange sense of unreality. The foreclosure that had seemed inevitable just a month earlier had been resolved with a simple wire transfer. The financial crisis that had consumed her every waking moment for 3 years had been temporarily stabilized, giving her breathing room to pursue longer-term solutions. But the most profound moment came that evening, as Elena stood beside the stone well house, now surrounded by scientific equipment and monitoring systems installed by the research team. The simple structure that had been a utilitarian part of the ranch landscape for decades had become the center of activity that might not only save the Cortez Ranch, but potentially help thousands of injured veterans recover from the invisible wounds of war. As the sunset painted the mountains in deepening shades of purple and gold, Elena placed her hand on the cool stones of the well house and whispered, "Thank you, Michael, for taking such good care of this old well. I think you somehow knew it was special, even if you didn't know exactly how." The breeze that stirred her hair felt like a caress, and for the first time since Michael's death, Elena felt something like peace settling around her shoulders. The future remained uncertain, with complex negotiations and development decisions ahead, but the immediate crisis had passed. The ranch that had been slipping through her fingers was secure, at least for now, and the path forward held promise rather than despair. Elena Cortez was beginning to understand that sometimes salvation comes disguised as another person's need, and that the most overlooked resources can be the most precious gifts. The water that had flowed beneath her struggling ranch for generations was about to become the foundation for a new chapter in the Cortez family legacy, one that might honor Michael's memory in ways she could never have imagined. The transformation of Elena Cortez's life continued to accelerate in the weeks following the bridge financing agreement. What had been a desperate struggle for survival shifted into a whirlwind of activity that brought new people, possibilities, and perspectives to the isolated Montana ranch. The property that had been slowly decaying under financial constraints now hummed with purpose as scientists, engineers, and military officials came and went, each visit reinforcing the extraordinary value of the resource that had been hiding beneath the parched landscape. Dr. Chen and his Department of Defense research team established a temporary laboratory in the ranch's old equipment barn, converting the space that had once housed hay balers and tractors into a sophisticated testing facility filled with analytical equipment, computer workstations, and specialized storage systems for water samples. The scientists worked long hours, analyzing the specific mineral compositions of the spring water, conducting cellular response tests, and developing protocols for potential therapeutic applications. "We're seeing remarkable results," Dr. Chen told Elena during their weekly progress meeting. "The combination of minerals in your spring water appears to reduce neuroinflammation markers by 78% in laboratory models, significantly better than our current synthetic compounds. And unlike pharmaceutical approaches, the natural composition seems to produce minimal side effects while promoting cellular repair mechanisms." The team expanded their testing to include different extraction methods, storage protocols, and delivery systems that might preserve the water's therapeutic properties for military applications. They explored everything from concentrated mineral extracts to specialized hydration systems that could be deployed in field hospitals or rehabilitation centers. Meanwhile, Julia Blackwood coordinated negotiations with multiple interested parties, each offering different development models and compensation structures. The DoD's Therapeutic Resources Division proposed a long-term research partnership that would provide stable funding while maintaining the ranch as a controlled research environment. Wellness industry developers presented plans for luxury therapeutic spa facilities that would combine the spring water's benefits with Montana's natural beauty. Medical research institutions offered academic partnerships that would explore broader applications beyond military medicine. "You've gone from having no options to having too many," Blackwood observed during one of their strategy sessions. "Our challenge now is determining which development path best serves your long-term interests while honoring what matters most to you about this property and its potential." These conversations forced Elena to clarify her own priorities and vision for the future, something she hadn't had the luxury to consider during the years of crisis management. As she evaluated different proposals, she found herself returning to the same core values that had guided her and Michael throughout their marriage: service to others, preservation of the land's natural character, and creating opportunities that benefited the broader community rather than just their own family. 3 months after Dr. Wilson's fateful visit, Elena received the development proposal that would ultimately reshape not just her future, but the lives of thousands of wounded veterans. Colonel James Harrison, director of the Pentagon's Veterans Recovery Initiative, arrived at the ranch, accompanied by a team of military officials, medical specialists, and facility planners. The distinguished officer, who had lost his right leg during combat operations in the Middle East, moved with the aid of a prosthetic limb and the quiet dignity of someone who had transformed personal tragedy into purposeful leadership. "Mrs. Cortez," Colonel Harrison began, as they sat in Elena's living room, "we've been reviewing Dr. Chen's research findings regarding your spring water's therapeutic properties, and we believe this resource could be the cornerstone of a revolutionary approach to veteran rehabilitation." He outlined a vision that made Elena's heart race with excitement and validation. The Department of Defense was proposing to establish the nation's first comprehensive natural therapeutics recovery center for wounded veterans, a facility that would combine the healing properties of the geothermal spring with integrative therapy approaches, including Elena's existing equine program. "Rather than extracting the water for use elsewhere," Colonel Harrison explained, "we believe the optimal approach is to bring veterans to the source. The combination of the spring's therapeutic properties, the ranch's natural setting, and your established expertise in equine therapy creates a unique healing environment that can't be replicated through bottled products or extracted compounds." The proposal included a 30-year partnership agreement that would preserve Elena's ownership of the property while providing $58 million in development funding and operational support. The Pentagon would construct state-of-the-art medical facilities, rehabilitation centers, and residential accommodations for veterans and medical staff, all designed to complement the ranch's natural landscape and agricultural character. Elena's Healing Hooves program would be expanded and integrated into comprehensive treatment protocols that combined the spring water's therapeutic properties with equine therapy, outdoor rehabilitation, and specialized medical care. "What makes this approach different," Colonel Harrison continued, "is that it's holistic rather than pharmaceutical. Instead of developing drugs based on isolated compounds from your spring water, we want to create an environment where wounded veterans can benefit from the complete therapeutic context: the water, the animals, the landscape, the community of fellow veterans. Our research suggests this integrated approach produces better outcomes than any single intervention alone." The financial terms of the proposal were exceptional, providing immediate development funding of $12 million for initial construction and facility upgrades, followed by annual operational funding of $5 million plus performance bonuses based on therapeutic outcomes and veteran satisfaction metrics. The agreement included provisions for Elena to serve as Director of Equine Therapy, with a substantial salary, benefits package, and research support for expanding her therapeutic riding methodologies. "Mrs. Cortez," Colonel Harrison said as he concluded the presentation, "we believe your ranch could become the model for a new generation of veteran rehabilitation facilities, places that heal through natural resources and human connection rather than just medication and conventional therapy. The spring water that your husband's grandfather discovered nearly a century ago could help thousands of men and women recover from the physical and psychological wounds of military service." The vision resonated deeply with Elena, validating her and Michael's long-held belief that healing happens most profoundly when people connect with nature, animals, and purposeful activity. The proposal would preserve the ranch's character, while expanding its therapeutic mission, a perfect continuation of the legacy she and Michael had begun building together. "How soon could this happen?" Elena asked, her mind already racing with possibilities. "And what would it mean for my current operations?" "We can begin initial development within 60 days of contract signing," Colonel Harrison replied. "The first phase would focus on water management systems, basic medical facilities, and upgrading existing structures while maintaining your current operations. Full implementation would occur over approximately 18 months, with the first veteran cohorts arriving for treatment within 8 to 10 months. The proposal included detailed timelines, architectural concepts, and operational frameworks that demonstrated the depth of planning behind the initiative. The Pentagon had clearly been developing this approach for some time, perhaps even before Dr. Wilson's discovery of Elena's spring, and had refined the concept based on the specific properties of the Cortez Ranch resources. After Colonel Harrison and his team departed, Elena spent the evening walking the property, imagining how each area might be transformed to serve wounded veterans while maintaining the ranch's natural beauty and agricultural heritage. The eastern pastures, where Michael had planned to build indoor riding facilities, could house the medical center and rehabilitation complex. The southern fields that had been lying fallow due to water shortages could become therapeutic gardens and outdoor treatment spaces. The historic barn could be restored and expanded to accommodate more therapy horses and specialized equipment. As the full moon rose over the mountains, casting silver light across the landscape, Eleanor felt Michael's presence more strongly than at any time since his death. This opportunity seemed to perfectly unite their shared values, his dedication to the land, and her professional background in therapeutic services. It felt like the completion of a circle, as if everything in their lives had been preparing them for this moment, even the painful loss and struggles of recent years. The following week, Elena convened a video call with her children to discuss the Pentagon's proposal. Sophia joined from her veterinary school apartment in Colorado, while Marco connected from his naval base in San Diego, both eager to hear about the developments that had been unfolding since Elena's brief updates about the water discovery. "It's extraordinary, Mom," Sophia said after Elena had outlined the Veterans Center proposal. "Dad would be amazed to know that his grandfather's well would help heal wounded soldiers. It's exactly the kind of purpose-driven enterprise he always believed in." Marco, in his naval uniform, nodded in agreement. "As someone serving alongside people who might someday need this kind of care, I can't think of a better use for our family ranch. This transforms our personal struggle into something meaningful for the whole military community." Their enthusiastic support confirmed Elena's own instincts. This wasn't just a financial solution to their family's problems. It was an opportunity to create something of lasting significance that honored Michael's legacy while serving others in profound need. With her children's blessing, Elena moved forward decisively. She instructed Julia Blackwood to focus negotiations exclusively on refining the Pentagon's proposal, stepping away from competing offers from wellness industry developers and private research institutions. Though some of these alternatives might have generated greater short-term profits, none aligned so perfectly with the values and vision that Elena held for the property's future. The legal negotiations progressed quickly, as the Department of Defense had both the motivation and resources to expedite the process. Blackwood's expertise proved invaluable as she helped Elena secure favorable terms regarding operational control, intellectual property rights for therapeutic methodologies, and long-term protections for the ranch's ecological systems and water resources. "We've achieved something unusual here," Blackwood told Elena after the final contract review. "Most natural resource development agreements eventually separate the resource from the land and the people who discovered it. This partnership keeps everything integrated. The water stays in place, you remain involved in its application, and the benefits flow to people who truly need them, rather than just generating corporate profits." 65 days after Colonel Harrison's initial visit, Elena signed the partnership agreement in a ceremony attended by Pentagon officials, state representatives, veterans advocates, and a small contingent of military personnel who would potentially benefit from the center's therapeutic programs. The moment was both solemn and joyful, a formal recognition that the Cortez Ranch was beginning a new chapter of service and healing. The day after the contract signing, Elena watched in amazement as the first wave of military engineers and construction specialists arrived at the ranch. The Army Corps of Engineers would oversee the development process, bringing expertise in sustainable building practices, water resource management, and rapid deployment of specialized medical facilities. Unlike typical government projects that often moved at glacial pace, the Veterans Recovery Initiative had been designated a strategic priority with expedited approvals and dedicated resources. Colonel Harrison had appointed Major Sophia Reyes, a combat engineer with advanced degrees in sustainable development, to serve as project director for the ranch transformation. The young officer brought remarkable energy and vision to the role, working closely with Elena to ensure that each development decision honored both the land's natural character and its new therapeutic purpose. Our goal isn't to impose institutional structures on this beautiful landscape, Major Reyes explained during their initial planning walkthrough. We want to integrate healing facilities that complement the ranch's existing character while expanding its capacity to serve wounded warriors. The Major's team began with comprehensive mapping of the underground spring system, using ground-penetrating radar and specialized sensors to create three-dimensional models of the geothermal resource. This scientific understanding would guide the placement of wellness facilities, ensuring optimal access to the therapeutic water while protecting the natural flow patterns that had sustained the spring for centuries. The construction approach emphasized adaptive reuse of existing structures whenever possible. The main barn was carefully renovated to preserve its historic character, while upgrading infrastructure to support expanded equine therapy programs. The ranch house, the heart of Elena's family life with Michael, remained her private residence, though its kitchen was expanded to serve as a teaching facility where veterans could learn nutrition and food preparation as part of their recovery process. New construction focused on harmonizing with the natural landscape. The medical center and rehabilitation facilities were designed as a series of connected pavilions that followed the natural contours of the eastern slope, their exteriors clad in local stone and sustainable timber that weathered naturally into the Montana palette of earth tones. Large windows captured mountain views, while rooftop solar arrays and geothermal heating systems minimized environmental impact. Most impressive was the central therapy pool, a sophisticated facility that channeled the spring water through carefully designed flow systems that preserved its mineral composition while creating various therapeutic environments. Veterans would progress through a sequence of pools with different temperatures, mineral concentrations, and support features, each addressing specific aspects of physical and neurological recovery. Throughout the development process, Elena remained actively involved, applying her knowledge of the land and her therapeutic expertise to countless design decisions. Her role gradually evolved from ranch owner to respected partner in creating a revolutionary healing environment. The military personnel working on the project, many of whom had combat experience or had worked with wounded veterans, treated her with a deference that acknowledged both her professional contributions and her personal journey from near disaster to meaningful purpose. 6 months into the development process, the ranch hosted its first official visitor, a congressional delegation evaluating the Veterans Recovery Initiative for potential expansion to other locations. Senator Harriet Williams, chair of the Veterans Affairs Committee, and herself, a former military physician, spent a full day touring the partially completed facilities and reviewing preliminary research data from Dr. Chen's ongoing studies of the spring water's therapeutic properties. Mrs. Cortez, the senator said, as they stood beside the newly completed therapy pool where the spring water flowed through architectural features designed to maximize mineral exposure, What you and the Pentagon are creating here represents the future of veteran care. For too long, we've relied primarily on pharmaceutical approaches to complex injuries. This integrated natural therapeutics model could revolutionize how we support our wounded warriors. The senator's enthusiasm translated into additional congressional support, accelerating certain aspects of the development timeline and expanding the scope of research activities at the ranch. What had begun as a specialized facility for treating traumatic brain injuries and PTSD evolved into a comprehensive natural therapeutics research center that would explore applications for a wider range of combat-related conditions. As construction progressed, Elena found herself increasingly drawn to the scientific aspects of the project. Her background in occupational therapy provided a foundation for understanding how the spring water's properties might be integrated with other therapeutic approaches. She began participating in research meetings with Dr. Chen's team, contributing insights from her years of working with veterans in the equine therapy program. You have an intuitive understanding of whole-person healing that complements our scientific approach, Dr. Chen told her after one particularly productive session. Your observations about how different veterans respond to combined modalities are helping us design more effective treatment protocols. This acknowledgement of her professional value, coming after years of feeling increasingly irrelevant and overwhelmed, rekindled Elena's confidence in her therapeutic expertise. She began documenting her observations more systematically, eventually collaborating with the research team on formal studies that would track the combined effects of the spring water treatments and equine therapy on veteran recovery metrics. 9 months after signing the partnership agreement, Elena stood beside Colonel Harrison as they welcomed the first cohort of veterans to the partially completed recovery center. 24 men and women, all suffering from traumatic brain injuries, PTSD, or both, arrived via military transport to begin a 12-week intensive treatment program that would serve as both therapeutic intervention and research protocol. Among them was Marine Sergeant David Keller, a 3-tour combat veteran whose traumatic brain injury and severe PTSD had proven resistant to conventional treatments. "I've tried everything," he told Elena during their initial orientation session. "Medications, cognitive therapy, exposure protocols, nothing has made a significant difference. This is my last hope before medical retirement." The vulnerability in the young sergeant's eyes reminded Elena of similar expressions she'd seen in veterans who had participated in the Healing Hooves program over the years, the cautious hope of someone who had been disappointed by too many promised solutions but couldn't stop searching for relief from invisible wounds. "We can't promise miracles, Sergeant," Elena replied honestly, "but we can promise that you'll be treated as a whole person here, not just a collection of symptoms. The water, the horses, the landscape, the community you'll form with other veterans, they all work together in ways we're still discovering. All we ask is that you approach the process with an open mind." Over the following weeks, Elena watched the first veteran cohort progress through the integrated treatment protocol, beginning each day with therapeutic immersion in the spring-fed pools, followed by specialized rehabilitation activities, equine therapy sessions, and community-building experiences that leveraged the ranch's natural resources. The program combined cutting-edge medical science with ancient healing practices, military precision with natural rhythms, individual recovery with community support. The transformation in many of the veterans became visible remarkably quickly. Sergeant Keller, who had arrived with pronounced physical symptoms including migraines, balance issues, and tremors, showed measurable improvement within 3 weeks. His neurological symptoms diminished in frequency and severity, while his psychological measures indicated significant reduction in anxiety and hypervigilance. "I can think clearly for the first time in 3 years," he told Elena, after completing his daily pool therapy. "It's like someone turned down the static in my brain. I still have bad moments, but I can feel myself coming back, the person I was before the explosion." Similar stories emerged throughout the cohort, veterans who had struggled with debilitating symptoms for years, finding new paths toward recovery through the combined effects of the mineral-rich spring water, structured rehabilitation activities, and the natural healing environment of the ranch. The preliminary data collected by Dr. Chen's research team indicated response rates significantly higher than those achieved by conventional medical approaches alone. As Elena observed these transformations, she experienced a profound sense of purpose that healed her own emotional wounds. The grief that had dominated her life since Michael's death began to transform into something new, not disappearing, but evolving into a different relationship with loss. The ranch that had been their shared dream was fulfilling its potential in ways neither of them could have imagined, becoming a place of renewal rather than decay. 1 year after Dr. Wilson had stumbled onto her property, Eleanor stood on the ridge, overlooking the ranch as the sun set behind the mountains. The landscape had changed dramatically, new facilities integrating seamlessly with restored historic structures, therapeutic gardens blooming where parched fields had once stretched, and purposeful activity replacing the desperate struggle for survival. The financial transformation had been equally profound. The Pentagon's development funding had not only secured the ranch's future, but had created opportunities beyond anything Elena had imagined during the darkest days of her financial crisis. The mortgage that had threatened everything was paid off. The equipment loans and credit card debt that had kept her awake at night were resolved. Her new position as Director of Integrative Therapies provided a salary that ensured personal financial security while allowing her to focus on expanding the healing methodologies that combined her expertise with the ranch's natural resources. But the most meaningful change was in Elena herself. The woman who had been drowning in grief and financial despair had found new purpose in helping others heal from their own traumas. The therapeutic skills that had once seemed irrelevant to saving her ranch had become central to its new mission. The isolation that had accompanied her struggles had been replaced by meaningful connection with people who valued both her professional contributions and her personal resilience. As darkness settled over the mountains and the lights of the recovery center created a warm glow across the property, Elena whispered into the evening breeze, "We did it, Michael. Not the way we planned, but maybe the way it was always meant to be." The simple act of offering water to a stranger in distress had revealed the extraordinary resource beneath her failing ranch. But it had also revealed something equally valuable. Within Elena herself, the capacity to transform devastation into opportunity, to find meaning in loss, and to create healing for others from her own experience of brokenness. The spring that had quietly flowed beneath the Cortez Ranch for generations was now acknowledged as a national treasure. But Elena understood that the true treasure was the purpose it had revealed, a purpose that would continue flowing through her life and the lives of countless wounded warriors for decades to come. 5 years had passed since Dr. Amara Wilson stumbled onto the Cortez Ranch, dehydrated and exhausted, setting in motion a transformation that no one could have predicted. On this crisp October morning, Elena Cortez stood on the observation deck of the newly completed research tower, surveying the extraordinary healing community that had emerged from what had once been a failing horse ranch on the brink of foreclosure. The Veterans Recovery Center at Cortez Springs, now internationally recognized as the premier natural therapeutics facility for combat-related trauma, spread across the landscape in harmonious integration with the Montana environment. Natural. Stone buildings with living roofs followed the contours of the land, therapeutic gardens burst with native plants selected for both healing properties and drought resistance. The expanded equine facilities housed 60 specially trained therapy horses that worked with veterans in programs Elena had developed and refined over the years. At the center of it all, the spring house, an architectural marvel that honored the original stone structure while creating a magnificent therapeutic environment, channeled the geothermal waters through a series of specialized pools, each designed to address specific aspects of neurological and physical recovery. The humble well that Michael's grandfather had dug by hand in 1937 had become the heart of a healing ecosystem that served over 300 veterans annually. Mrs. Cortez, a voice interrupted her reflections. The delegation from Walter Reed has arrived. They're gathering in the conference center for your presentation. Elena turned to find Captain Rivera, the facility's operations director, waiting respectfully. At 58, Elena had become a respected figure in both military and therapeutic communities, the unlikely pioneer of an approach to veteran recovery that had challenged conventional medical wisdom and proven remarkably effective. Thank you, Captain. I'll be right down. As Elena made her way through the facility toward the conference center, she passed dozens of veterans engaged in various aspects of the recovery program. A group worked with therapy horses in the covered arena that had finally fulfilled Michael's original vision. Others participated in guided meditation in the mineral pools, their faces peaceful despite the visible scars many bore. Still others tended the therapeutic gardens, finding healing in nurturing growing things while benefiting from the psychological effects of purposeful work in natural settings. The transformation extended far beyond the physical facilities. Scientific understanding of the spring water's therapeutic properties had advanced dramatically under Dr. Chen's continued research leadership. The unique mineral composition had been found to stimulate neural regeneration, reduce inflammation, and enhance neuroplasticity in ways that complemented conventional medical treatments while avoiding many of their side effects. Most importantly, the veterans themselves were transforming, moving from injury toward recovery, from isolation toward community, from trauma toward possibility. The integrated approach that combined the spring's natural compounds with evidence-based therapies, community support, and meaningful activity had produced recovery rates that consistently outperformed conventional medical protocols by significant margins. The conference center, constructed from locally harvested timber and featuring floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the mountain views, was filled with medical professionals from Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, the nation's flagship treatment facility for wounded warriors. They had come to learn about the Cortez Protocol with the goal of implementing elements of the approach at their own facility. As Elena took the podium, she felt a moment of awe at how completely her life had changed. From the desperate widow fighting foreclosure to recognized innovator in veteran recovery, the journey still seemed surreal at times. "Welcome to Cortez Springs," she began, her confidence shaped by years of presenting the facility's work to military officials, medical researchers, and congressional committees. What you're seeing here today began with a simple act of kindness, offering water to someone in need. That act revealed not just the extraordinary resource beneath this ranch, but a new purpose for my life and this land. Elena shared the facility's evolution from desperate beginning to international recognition, emphasizing the core philosophy that had guided its development. Healing happens most profoundly when natural resources, scientific understanding, and human connection work together to address both visible and invisible wounds. The spring water alone, remarkable as it is, doesn't create the outcomes we're achieving, she explained. It's the integration The way the water's properties enhance neural regeneration, while equine therapy rebuilds confidence. How garden work provides purpose, while community support reduces isolation. How the natural environment creates peace, while specialized therapies address specific trauma symptoms. The presentation included detailed outcome data from the 5 years of operations, statistics that had captured the attention of military medical leadership, congressional funding committees, and veterans advocacy organizations. Over 200 veterans had completed the 12-week intensive program, with 78% showing significant improvement in traumatic brain injury symptoms and 82% demonstrating meaningful reduction in PTSD markers. Follow-up studies indicated that these improvements were sustained at higher rates than those achieved through conventional treatments alone. But numbers tell only part of the story, Elena continued, shifting to the human impact of the center's work. The real measure of our success is in the lives rebuilt, the relationships restored, the futures reclaimed from trauma's grip. She introduced Marine Sergeant David Keller, now Major Keller, who had been among the first cohort of veterans to experience the Cortez Protocol. Once on the verge of medical retirement due to debilitating symptoms, he had recovered sufficiently to continue his military career and now served as the Pentagon's liaison for the Natural Therapeutics Initiative that had expanded the Cortez approach to 3 additional locations across the country. When I arrived here 5 years ago, Major Keller told the audience, I couldn't sleep more than 2 hours without nightmares. My migraines were so severe I could barely function. My marriage was failing because I couldn't connect emotionally with my wife and children. Conventional treatments had provided minimal relief, and I'd begun to believe my condition was permanent. Nudi, he described his experience with the integrated protocol, how the spring water treatments had reduced his neurological symptoms, while the broader therapeutic environment had addressed the psychological and social dimensions of his injuries. This approach didn't just treat my symptoms, it restored my identity beyond my injuries, he concluded. That's what makes Cortez Springs different from conventional medical facilities. Here, veterans aren't just patients to be processed through treatment protocols. We're whole people with complex needs, unique strengths, and the capacity to heal in ways medical science is still coming to understand. After the formal presentation, Eleanor led the Walter Reed delegation on a comprehensive tour of the facility, explaining how each element had been designed to contribute to the overall therapeutic environment. The medical specialists were particularly interested in the specialized hydrotherapy systems that maximized exposure to the spring's beneficial compounds while providing controlled therapeutic environments for different aspects of recovery. The Pentagon is considering establishing a similar facility on the East Coast, explained Dr. Marilyn Thompson, Walter Reed's Chief of Rehabilitation Medicine. We're evaluating several natural spring sites, though none appear to have the specific mineral composition found here. The question is whether we can replicate your outcomes with different water sources by compensating through adjustments to other aspects of the protocol. Elena had been consulting on this expansion initiative, helping military medical planners understand which elements of the Cortez approach were dependent on the specific spring properties and which could be adapted to different environments. The Cortez protocol had evolved into a comprehensive therapeutic methodology that was being studied in medical schools and implemented in various forms at rehabilitation centers throughout the country. After the delegation departed, Elena took a daily walk through the property, a ritual that kept her connected to both the land and the healing work occurring upon it. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the landscape as veterans engaged in various aspects of the recovery program. Some worked with horses in the expansive outdoor arena, where Elena had once feared she would have to sell off her remaining animals to cover basic expenses. Others tended garden plots, where drought-stricken fields had once stretched toward the horizon. Still others participated in art therapy sessions on the wide porches of buildings constructed with healing in mind. Elena's path took her to the original spring house, the stone structure that Michael's grandfather had built to protect the well that would ultimately save the ranch and transform countless lives. Though now incorporated into the larger therapeutic facility, this core structure had been preserved exactly as it had stood for decades, a reminder of the humble origins of what had become an internationally significant healing center. As she stood beside the historic well, Elena noticed a woman sitting quietly on a nearby bench, one of the newer veterans in the current recovery cohort. Army Captain Sarah Mitchell had arrived 3 weeks earlier with severe PTSD and a traumatic brain, injury sustained during a helicopter crash in a combat zone. Her initial assessment had revealed symptoms similar to those that had nearly ended Major Keller's career 5 years earlier: debilitating migraines, cognitive processing issues, emotional regulation challenges, and the profound isolation that often accompanied invisible wounds. "Mind if I join you?" Elena asked, approaching the bench. Captain Mitchell looked up, momentarily startled before recognition dawned. "Mrs. Cortez, please do." Elena sat beside the young officer, respecting the contemplative silence for several moments before speaking. "This is where it all began," she said finally, nodding toward the spring house. A simple well dug by a rancher who had no idea what he'd found. It provided water for 4 generations of my husband's family before we discovered what made it special. Captain Mitchell studied the historic structure. "I've been reading about the center's history. It's remarkable how something so valuable could remain hidden for so long." "The water was always doing its work," Elena replied. "Family members and ranch visitors commented on how good it tasted, how refreshed they felt, but we never thought to question why until Dr. Wilson stumbled onto our property that August day." The captain nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to help us see what's been right in front of us all along." "Exactly," Elena agreed. "And sometimes what seems like a disaster, like Dr. Wilson getting lost during her research expedition, turns out to be the beginning of something extraordinary." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Captain Mitchell spoke again. "I'm starting to feel different," she admitted quietly. "The migraines are less frequent. I actually slept 4 hours without nightmares last night. The hypervigilance is less overwhelming." She looked at Elena with cautious hope. "Is this real? Will it last?" Elena recognized the question that nearly every veteran asked during their early weeks at the center: the fear that any improvement might be temporary, that the crushing symptoms would return once they left the supportive environment of Cortez. "Springs, what you're experiencing is real," Elena assured her. "The neurochemical changes triggered by the spring minerals create actual healing, not just symptom suppression. And the skills you're learning here, the mindfulness techniques, the emotional regulation strategies, the connection with horses and community, those go with you when you leave." She shared stories of veterans who had completed the program years earlier and continued to build on their recovery, many returning for brief refresher treatments that reinforced their progress while contributing to the center's long-term research on sustained healing. "The most important thing to understand," Elena continued, "is that healing isn't just about returning to who you were before your injury. It's about discovering who you can become through the recovery process, often someone stronger and more purposeful than you might have been otherwise." Elena knew this truth from her own experience. The financial disaster and grief that had nearly destroyed her had ultimately led to a life of greater purpose and impact than she could have imagined. The desperate widow fighting foreclosure had become an innovator in therapeutic approaches that changed thousands of lives. As sunset painted the mountains in shades of purple and gold, Elena concluded her daily rounds by visiting the memorial garden, a peaceful space dedicated to Michael's memory. The bronze plaque mounted on natural stone bore a simple inscription: "For Michael Cortez, whose care for this land prepared the way for its healing purpose. The waters he protected now help heal others." Elena often came here at day's end, sharing the day's events with Michael in the quiet way that had become her custom over the years. Today, she had especially meaningful news to share. "The Pentagon made it official this morning," she said softly. "They're establishing the Cortez Institute for Natural Therapeutics Research, a permanent academic center that will ensure this. Work continues and expands long after we're gone. Your family's land will be helping wounded warriors for generations to come." The breeze stirred the aspen leaves overhead, creating a gentle rustling that Elena had come to interpret as Michael's response over the years. She smiled, feeling the familiar sense of his presence that often came in this special place. The following morning brought another significant moment in the center's evolution: the arrival of the first international delegation of medical specialists and military officials interested in implementing elements of the Cortez Protocol in their own countries. Representatives from Britain, Australia, Canada, and several NATO allies gathered in the conference center to learn about the therapeutic approach that had gained worldwide attention through published research and dramatic recovery stories. As Elena prepared to address the international visitors, she reflected on how far the vision had expanded beyond the original concept of a specialized treatment center for American veterans. The Cortez Protocol was becoming a global methodology for addressing combat trauma, a framework that could be adapted to different cultures, environments, and healthcare systems while maintaining its core integrated approach. "Welcome to Cortez Springs," Elena began, surveying the diverse group of international experts. "What you're seeing today began with a simple act of human kindness that revealed an extraordinary hidden resource. But the true value of that discovery has emerged through collaboration. The partnership between natural resources, scientific understanding, military precision, and human compassion." She explained how the center had evolved through continuous learning and adaptation, with each veteran's experience contributing to refinement of the protocols and expansion of therapeutic applications. The approach that had initially focused on traumatic brain injuries and PTSD had expanded to address a wider range of combat-related conditions, from chronic pain to moral injury to the complex grief that accompanied losing comrades in war. "The spring water remains our unique foundation," Elena acknowledged. "But we've identified elements of the integrated protocol that can be effectively implemented in various environments using locally available resources. The essential principles, combining natural elements with evidence-based therapies, addressing physical and psychological dimensions simultaneously, creating healing communities rather than isolated treatment experiences. These can be translated across cultural and geographic boundaries." The international visitors were particularly interested in the center's long-term data, showing sustained recovery rates exceeding those achieved through conventional medical approaches alone. Military medical officers who had struggled with the limitations of pharmaceutical interventions for complex combat trauma recognize the potential of the Cortez approach to complement existing treatment frameworks while reducing reliance on medications with problematic side effects. "The most powerful aspect of what you've created here," observed British Colonel Emma Harrington, "is that it honors the whole person, body, mind, spirit, and community. Our medical systems often fragment treatment, addressing physical symptoms separately from psychological needs, dividing the person into specialties rather than supporting integrated healing. Following the formal presentation, Elena led the international delegation on a comprehensive tour of the facility, highlighting how each element contributed to the overall therapeutic environment. They observed veterans engaged in various aspects of the protocol, from specialized hydrotherapy sessions in the spring-fed pools to equine therapy activities in the expanded riding facilities, to community-building experiences that reconnected wounded warriors with their sense of purpose and identity beyond their injuries. The tour concluded at the research center, where Dr. Chen and his expanded scientific team continued investigating the specific mechanisms through which the spring water influenced neurological recovery. Advanced imaging technologies allowed researchers to document changes in brain activity and inflammation markers as veterans progressed through the treatment protocol, while sophisticated biochemical analysis identified the specific compounds responsible for various therapeutic effects. We're only beginning to understand the full potential of these natural compounds, Dr. Chen explained to the visitors. Beyond their applications for combat trauma, we're seeing promising indications for treating certain neurodegenerative conditions, inflammatory disorders, and even some aspects of age-related cognitive decline. This expanded research focus had attracted partnerships with major medical research institutions and pharmaceutical companies interested in developing targeted treatments based on the spring's unique properties. These collaborations had created additional revenue streams that supported the center's non-profit operations while funding scholarship programs that made the treatment available to veterans who might not otherwise have access to specialized care. That evening, Elena hosted a dinner for the international delegation at her home, the original ranch house that had been carefully preserved amid the center's expansion. Though she could have built a new residence anywhere on the property, Elena had chosen to remain in the house she had shared with Michael, finding comfort in maintaining that connection to their life together, even as everything around it transformed. As they enjoyed a meal featuring ingredients from the center's therapeutic gardens, conversation turned to Elena's personal journey from financial crisis to international recognition. "What strikes me most about your story," said Australian Wing Commander James Collins, "is how completely your understanding of success and security transformed through this experience. You went from fighting to save a ranch to helping save lives, from measuring value in financial terms to measuring it in human impact." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "When you're facing foreclosure and bankruptcy, it's hard to see beyond immediate survival. But this experience taught me that true security isn't about bank accounts or property deeds. It's about purpose and contribution. I feel more secure now than I ever did before, even though technically I don't own as much as I once did." While Elena had retained ownership of the original ranch property through the partnership agreement with the Pentagon, much of the expanded facility operated under a complex trust structure that ensured its long-term dedication to veteran recovery regardless of future political or funding changes. The arrangement provided Elena with financial security while focusing the center's resources on its therapeutic mission rather than personal enrichment. "The irony," Elena continued, "is that by letting go of my desperate grip on what I thought mattered, preserving the ranch exactly as it had been, I discovered something far more valuable. This land is fulfilling its purpose in ways Michael and I could never have imagined, helping heal wounds that go far deeper than the ones I was facing." The following morning, as the international delegation prepared to depart, Elena received news that brought her journey full circle in a way that seemed almost too perfectly symmetrical to be coincidence. Dr. Amara Wilson, the geologist whose Dehydration and need for assistance had revealed the extraordinary value of the Cortez Spring, had been appointed director of the newly established National Therapeutic Resources Initiative, a federal program that would identify and develop natural resources with healing applications throughout the country. "She's requesting that you serve as special advisor to the initiative," explained Colonel Harrison, who had delivered the news personally. "Your experience bridging scientific understanding with practical therapeutic applications is exactly what this new program needs as it expands the natural therapeutics approach to additional locations." But the request represented both validation of Elena's contributions and an opportunity to extend the impact of the Cortez approach beyond the boundaries of her own property. The national initiative would create a network of natural therapeutic centers, each leveraging local resources while implementing the integrated methodology that had proven so effective at Cortez Springs. As Eleanor walked Colonel Harrison back to his vehicle, they paused at the ridge overlooking the center, the same viewpoint where she had once stood, contemplating the imminent loss of everything she valued. The contrast between that desperate moment and the thriving healing community now spread before them could hardly have been more dramatic. "Sometimes I still can't believe how completely everything changed," Elena admitted. "From the brink of losing it all to creating something that helps so many people. It feels like someone else's story when I look back on it." Colonel Harrison smiled. "That's how transformation works, Mrs. Cortez. We become different people through the challenges we face and the choices we make in response to them. The woman who was facing foreclosure 5 years ago and the internationally respected therapeutic innovator standing here today, they're connected by experience but separated by growth." As the colonel departed, Elena remained at the viewpoint, contemplating the next phase of the journey that had begun with a simple act of kindness toward a stranger in distress. The desperate widow fighting to save her family's ranch had become a pioneer in therapeutic approaches that changed thousands of lives. The land that had seemed worthless during the drought had revealed its hidden treasure, not just in the valuable minerals flowing beneath its surface, but in its capacity to become a place of profound healing for those who had sacrificed so much in service to their country. Elena thought about the countless veterans who had arrived at Cortez Springs, broken by their experiences, and departed with renewed hope and possibility. She thought about the expanding impact as the Cortez Protocol spread to additional facilities across the country and around the world. She thought about Michael, whose care for the family well had preserved the resource that would ultimately transform everything. The geothermal spring that had flowed silently beneath the ranch for centuries was now acknowledged as a national treasure. But Elena understood that the true treasure was the purpose it had revealed, a purpose that would continue flowing through generations yet to come. As the morning sun illuminated the healing community spread before her, Elena Cortez embraced the truth that had emerged from her journey. Sometimes our greatest gifts remain hidden until our greatest challenges reveal them. Sometimes the simple act of helping someone in need opens doors we never knew existed. And sometimes the path that seems to be leading toward loss is actually guiding us toward our most meaningful contribution. The once failing Montana ranch had become a beacon of hope for wounded warriors seeking healing beyond what conventional medicine could provide. The widow who had faced financial ruin had become a respected innovator in therapeutic approaches that changed thousands of lives. The crisis that had threatened everything Elena valued had ultimately revealed purpose and possibility beyond anything she could have imagined. And it had all begun with a single glass of water offered to a stranger in need, proof that even in our most desperate moments, the capacity to extend kindness to others might be the very act that reveals the hidden treasures beneath our feet and within our hearts. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.